Hello, welcome back to the channel, and this one is about porters. So, on the thumbnail I've probably put, what is a porter? Now, I thought I knew what a porter was. Well, I knew a little bit about what a porter was until I started to do some research and realised there's lots of arguments about what a porter is. So I've got the basics of what a porter is, and basically a porter dates back all the way to the 1700s, so in the 18th century. Now, in London, they had what was called the London brown beer, and they had a stale beer and a mild beer. The mild being the fresh London brown, the stale being an aged London brown. What they used to do, you used to get these beers, and you could go in, you could order a stale, or you could order a mild, or you could order basically a mix of each of them. And what was happening then was there was a middleman. So the brewery would brew a mild beer. Then the guy, it's basically the middleman, would hold on to the mild beer, stale it, and then sell that to the publicans. So the brewery was missing out because it cost more for them to store it and then sell it on. So they was actually missing out. They were selling it mild, and the middleman was basically getting this mild beer, London brown beer, and then holding on to it, making money, selling it for more for stale. So that was sort of the start of a few things. So there was this was going on, for the breweries were losing out on money. And then there was a rise in tax on the ingredients. There was the war with France, that was rising tax. So there was a bit of a struggle, especially, with taxes and stuff. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to brew a lower ABV beer, and they wanted it to be something that the brewery could store themselves and then take it out to the pubs. And so they were sort of reinventing the London brown beer, and they wanted to make it more hoppy. They had to just drop the ABV a little bit, and it was basically because it was taking so long to age. They didn't know, the 1700s, they didn't know that the quality was getting better with age. They didn't know why that was. They didn't find out until about the 1900s about what was going on there. So in the 1700s, they just knew that with age, the beer got better. And then they put this product out into London, and the labourers, basically the porters, the docks, the porters on the docks, they had different names for the porters: the fellowship porters and the ticket porters. So they was enjoying this new beer, and there was about 5,000 of these porters in London at the time. And the beer was sort of known then. I'll put it on the screen, but it's called the entire butt. A butt is like a big barrel of beer, and it's all to do with the mash and stuff, the grist. I'll put that on the below somewhere now to explain that, but it was known as the entire the beer. And then, like I say, these folk, the porters, so you had like the ones there was all, like, say, on the docks and in the streets. There was just basically how we'd say now, like dockers and postal workers. It was just them. They were the porters. So they took on this beer. They really enjoyed it, and they thought it was like it reminded them porters, them labourers at that time, of themselves. And it then took on the name Porter after the porters, because it was like, it was a wholesome beer, and they were wholesome workers. So that's a story that I've seen. There's lots, like I said, I've done lots of research, and that's what they're saying, is that's how it got its name from, the porters. So they came up with the porter beer, and then the stronger porters were stout porters, and then you had other, like there was a even stronger, so you had the double stout, you had an imperial stout. So the stout porter just went up and up and up. So basically a stout originated from the stout porter, originated from the porter. Stouts were already around then, but stouts could be pale, because all stout meant was strong beer. So you could have stout pales, stout porter, and that just evolved then into what we know now as stouts. But that's a different story. We're just talking about porter now. I might do something about the stouts. So moving on, like I said, the beers were all brown. So there was 100% brown malt brewed, the original porters. And that was just a case of the brown malts then were cheaper than the pale malts because there was less process, believe it or not, involved in browning the malt, because it was going to a very dark malt, and it was actually took more time to look after a pale malt to make sure it didn't go too dark. So it was a cheaper malt to buy. So it was brewing 100% brown malt, and then that's what the brown beer, the London brown beer, that's where it came from. And then came the hydrometer. Now, hydrometer measures like gravity in beer, and they realised then that the brown malt wasn't that efficient. They had to use more brown malt to try and get a bigger gravity in the beers. So pale malt was actually going to be cheaper cheaper to them, because the amount of they were spending on brown malt to try and get this gravity up, all they had to do was add some pale malt and reduce the brown malt. So that's what they started to do. So more recipes, sort of like it got to in the 1800s, there was more pale malt being used and then less brown malt, but they were still using brown malt. They was doing a bit of a mix, and then that changed again in, I think it was 1817. A guy invented patent black malt. Now this would add colour and some flavour, but you could use basically 95% pale malt, so get a good efficiency, and 5% of his black malt for the colour and that slight roastiness for a porter. Now, what they did in London, they sort of used some black painted malt, they used some of the pale malt, but they used the brown malt as well, because they wanted just to keep it traditionally in the recipe. So I think I quite like the fact they did that. So they just basically increased pale malt, some black malt, and some brown malt, just to keep that flavour as well that people were enjoying. So that was around about 1817 when that malt was introduced. So again, it evolved then. So it's gone from all brown, pale and a little bit of brown, to pale, brown, and then you've got black painted malt in there. And then further on, again, like I say, it's a different video, the stout just went off, and the porter sort of moved into other grains as well. And then at that time, all the ingredients were taxed, so they couldn't use sugars in the early 1800s, but they did in the late 1800s. So then you had like Demi-john, I can't even say it. Demi-john sugar was used as well, so that would just increase the efficiency. So they're getting it just bump up that the gravity of the porter as well. So it was basically evolving all the time. And then obviously we're getting into like the 20th century, and again there was the tax on ABV. It was different. It wasn't just the ingredients, it was also then the ABV was being taxed. So again the porter came down in ABV, and it sort of started to disappear, and the mild was sort of coming more and more, and stouts were coming more, and the porter sort of then started to die away. And it wasn't really until America sort of revived porters, and then in the UK, the brewers in the UK were sort of bringing it back as well. One thing I would say is, back when they realised that porter was a beer that was aging, and that Brettanomyces and everything was just working, because they didn't know what yeast was then. It was just in barrels. The bigger breweries who had more money could basically grab this and sort of run with it and make some good money, because they had a lot more storage to store the beers and keep it for 12 months or so in barrels before it actually went out to publicans. So they started to make headway. So basically there was 12 big breweries in London at the time doing the porters. These included Barclay Perkins, Truman and Whitbread, and there's more. I'll put them on the screen as well. So these big breweries were just taking the porter and running with it, and sort of brewing more porters than anything else. A few fun facts about porter. In Ireland, it was known as plain, and up until I think around about maybe 70s, they was doing something called high cask and low cask, and that was basically in Ireland. They had two casks. They had a flat porter, and they had a lively porter, which when it just left the brewery, it just had a little bit more of really young porter added to it, and it sort of made it really lively. And what the barman would do would get his glass, pour some lively beer in, which would just give like mainly just a glass of head, let it settle a little bit, then top it up with flat beer, and that give them the lovely looking, what you'd see now, the nice dark beer with a lovely white head. And I think that's around about the 70s when that ceased in Ireland. But they did know the porter as the plain, even though Guinness is a porter. But there you go. The drink was used to celebrate royal weddings, victories against the war with French. So it was quite, it was seen quite highly, it was highly regarded, the porter, as well in London. And, it's seen as, quite royal, which, when you think about it, it started off with the labourers and stuff, and then it just went up and up and up. So, it's, that beer is, it's got a massive story to it. I can't fit it all in here now. And a lot of these stories, when I was looking online, there's arguments against and for, and it's just like crazy. You need to check out Martin Cannell, Ron Patterson, and I mean, they've got some really interesting information on the internet if you want to have a look more, because the porter story is really, really good. Also, there was a great London beer flood in 1814, and that was at Horseshoe Brewery. Unfortunately, there was 8 lives lost in that, 4 children, 4 women. And what it was 128,000 gallon vat fell apart, and it also took out a couple of smaller vats. And in all, in that actual area storage, it was 70 vats, and it was one of the smaller vats that actually got damaged, but it's still huge. In all, 7,664 barrels of porter were lost, but more importantly, there was lives lost as well, because this vat, one of the bands basically broke, and it just flooded the area. And they were saying it in one way, they was fortunate there wasn't as many lives lost, because the area, the workers were still at work, not in that brewery, but around, and hadn't returned home, which is just a shame. It really, really is. And it's a disaster, and it's linked in again with the porter in the area. It's just such a shame. London Porter was the first beer to be widely exported to Ireland in 1730, North America and India up to 1760. So the porter was the first beer being exported, to India. Most people think it's the IPA, but no, India Porter was being exported in 1760. Now that's just fantastic. And then there's another style which evolved from porter, which is the Baltic Porter. Now again, there's lots of argument about that, because the Baltic Porter was when the porter was being imported over to Russia as well. On the way, some of the beers were sold to the Baltic areas, and people enjoyed it that much, and it got to a point where, with the Napoleon War and stuff, that we was blocked from basically taking any beers overseas, well, anything, and they started to brew their own version of a porter. I think it was known to be like a double stout porter at the time, so it was a stronger version of a porter, and in the Baltic area, I think Poland as well, Estonia, they started to brew their versions of porter, and that evolved into the Baltic Porter, which was then lager yeast. There's a bottom fermenting porter, so it's a lager yeast, because that's what they was used to doing, and and that evolved into what we know now as the Baltic Porter. So a little bit higher strength, but lagered, so it's a lager porter, I suppose. It's lagered, it goes through the same process, it gives you a clear, crisp porter. That evolved from the porter being exported over to Russia at the time. And porters historically started off at being around about 6%, and then they just, like I said, they just went up to like double porters, imperial porters. So the porter has got a huge story, and if we did the stout as well, it's just another story. But the London Porter started off as a London brown beer, and it was in big, massive vats. It was stored for over a year. It was served to these folk, the porters, like I say, the 2 different groups, and eventually came to like street porters as well. And that's where the name came from, because it was just a drink for that people at the time, and that's where it evolved to. So let's crack open. I've got here 2 London Porters. Now, one's from Marks and Spencer's, and this is brewed by Meantime Brewery. Now, none of these really, like you could call an original porter, because they'll have different malts in, malts that you couldn't actually get back in the maybe the early 1800s as well. So the London Porter from Fuller's, I think it's only started brewed. This was quite new. This wasn't being brewed as far as I'm aware, in the 1800s at all. I just think this was more in the 20th century, this porter, but it is a nod to a London Porter and the recipe. So it says London Porter takes its name from the porters who carried goods around the streets of London in the 18th century. This prize-winning beer is brewed using pale, crystal, brown and chocolate malts combined with fuggles and hops, giving a rich, dark and complex flavour. London Porter boasts wonderful chocolate notes and a smooth, satisfying finish. So there we go. There's the Fuller's London Porter. So let's get this one cracked into the glass. Let's have a look at what a London Porter looks like nowadays, with a take on... I've just got my new bottle opener. So this is what it looks like nowadays, with a take on an original recipe. I'm sure I've read that, but it has got, some of them malts there would have been used more than likely in the late 1800s, but originally in 1700. No, it's a bit different, like I say, but that's pouring lovely. It looks fantastic, and this is what I'm saying about the high and low cask. This is what the look they would have been looking for, that lovely creamy head with that really dark looking, what's that, got something in there like that. Just looks superb. It really does. That I can show you that on there. So yeah, we've got a nice creamy looking head, really dark looking beer. Looks fantastic. I can take my glasses off now, can't I? So aroma, straight away I'm getting like a dark fruits, lots of dark fruit, and a hint of, I'm going to say chocolate, but like a dark chocolate. A little bit of caramel. It smells superb. So that's a nod to a London Porter. Oh, cheers. Okay, we had a problem. Camera's cut off. Got a new camera. I'm trying to get used to it. It's just a bit driving us mad. Okay, so we're back. And yeah, enjoying this. This is, like I said, to take on an original 19th century recipe. It's just a lovely smooth beer. I think it's coming in about 5.4%. Lots of dark fruit notes. Lots of like a nice chocolate note, a bit of chocolateness, chocolating. What would you say? Chocolatiness going on there. That's a really, really nice beer. So this one, let's just put this one to the side now. This one here is the Meantime London Porter. Now this has got lots of malts in it. Again, there's no way it's not. I think the actual Fuller's is closer to a traditional London Porter, but this is more of a modern take, I suppose, because this has got quite a lot of malts in there. Which, if, like I was saying before, there was never that many malts in the traditional recipes. But let's have a look at what it looks like. It looks like a dark brown in colour. Looks slightly different in colour than the last one, to be honest. Don't know if that's picking up on camera, but it's coming together. It's forming a nice off-white, creamy-looking head. I don't know if it's going to say on the back of the bottle what malts are in this, but that again just looks absolutely. Let me just move that one out of the way. That looks like a cracking beer. Nice creamy looking head again on there. So yeah, looks fantastic. It does look very similar, if I'm honest. Putting them both together, very, very similar. It's not much to change between the two, if I'm honest. But yeah, little red, dark brown hues. Oh, it's different on the aroma. This has got a dark fruit, berry fruit. I'd say a little bit more coffee note on this one. Bit of vanilla-like note. And a little bit of smokiness. Or is that just in my head now after all the talking? I don't know. That smells good as well. Cheers. What ABV is this one? 5.5, so there's nothing in it ABV-wise. I'd say they're both. It's definitely got a smokiness to it, though. This has got a smokiness to it, a little bit more complex than that one, but that one, I think the Fuller's one is fantastic beer. This one's got a little bit of smokiness on the back end there. They're both, I wouldn't say, they're not full-bodied, 100%. They're more medium to light-bodied, both of them. Now, is that what a porter's supposed to be like? It's got sweet fruit note, dark sweet fruit. Definitely got chocolate, coffee. And I'm just getting this nice, subtle, roasty smokiness at the back end, which I do find quite pleasant. Get my glasses. What does it say about this London Porter then? About this beer. It says, this London Porter is brewed in Greenwich, using no fewer than 7 malts to recreate a historic recipe from the mid-1700s for a style of beer that was once synonymous with London. A perfect match for meats as well as cheeses and oysters. So yeah, that's the basically modern not modern brewers today doing London Porters. Now that takes me on to this one, the London Black by Anspach and Hobday. Now that's designed on their porter. Anspach and Hobday have got a porter out. They do a lot of, they like dark beers, and they do a lot of traditional style brewing as well. And this one is the London Black. So this is a nitro porter based on their London Porter. Now this is a bit of a, it's like they're getting into the market against Guinness. It's a 4.4% beer. Inspired by London's brewing heritage, this is a truly sessionable London Porter. Brewed for a smoother mouthfeel, perfectly balanced with cascading notes of coffee and velvety chocolate. A beer that champions the rich history and heritage of London's porters and modern independent brewing. Fantastic. The result is London Black, a beer that is easy drinking whilst full of character. Pour robustly, settle and enjoy. So that is, again, it's another take on a porter, but they have got a porter at 6.7%, and this is just a more sessionable version of that, and it's in this nitro, so it's an easy smooth, and it obviously to go against Guinness, which is fantastic. But it's a London brewery doing London Porter, which is fantastic. And then local to me, we've got the Piccadilly Porter from Cloudwater, which is a 4.5% beer. And it just says, inspired by the joy of classic beers, lively pubs and quaffable pints. And it doesn't really say anything much more on that. Hard pour, fully invert can, it says on there. Smooth and refined, quality craft beer in Manchester. So the porter, what I'm saying is, porters are brewed all over now. And you can get them all over the UK. But the original porter was a London Porter, and it was a London brown beer, and not the same as a London or a South brown ale. Brown ale's different than a brown beer. So there you go. There's my little video on what is a porter. I might do what is a stout, because that's interesting, because a stout basically is a porter. Yeah, it's just it's another name. It's a stronger version of a porter, but no more, because Guinness, what is that, 4.1, 4.2? That's a stout. It's a dry stout. So that's low. So yeah, we can go into a bit of a chat about that on maybe a stout video. But there we go. That's 2 really good beers, to be honest. Seems to not have the room to. There we go. London Porters. 2 really good examples, I'd say. More modern, but also looking back at the heritage, and both of them. And one of them says it's a 1700 recipe, which I do question. The other one I think is like an 1800 recipe, which could be true with the malts that they've said are in there. So yeah. So anyway, cheers, and I'll see you on another one.